Well, hello everybody. Thank you for coming on to Facebook Live. We're live in Medina, Ohio, and this is Jim Renacci, candidate for governor of Ohio, going against the famous Rhino Mike DeWine. My name is Brad Parscale. I was the former digital director in 2016 for President Trump, and in 2020 was campaign manager. Hopefully we'll see Mr. President Trump again in 2024. But I want to introduce Mr. Renacci, and then we're going to ask some questions, do some Q&A. You can ask your questions in the comments. We're going to have some fun here tonight, talk about some of the disastrous things that are occurring in our country and the state of Ohio, things on the immigration and the refugees coming in, mask mandates, vaccine mandates, not letting our parents, really help, manage our kids and let the school boards with this disastrous CRT and other items. But I'll introduce Governor candidate Jim Renacci right now.
Hey Brad, thanks for having me, and thank you all for being on tonight. Look, we are going to have some fun tonight. We're going to answer some of your questions. We're going to talk about some of the issues as well. For those of you that don't know me, let me just give you a brief thumb note of who I am. I came here 39 years ago, started my first business, took one business to 60 businesses, created over 1,500 jobs, employed over 3,000 people. I was happy in business and probably still would be in business, except in 2009, many of you remember the Obama administration took over General Motors, and General Motors ended up eliminating a number of car dealerships. One of those businesses I was talking to you about, one of the 60, was a Chevy dealership, had 59 employees, and quite frankly, we were doing very well. We were going to build a brand new location out on the highway here in Medina County. And lo and behold, in July of 2019, I get a letter saying, you are no longer going to be part of the General Motors family. Think about that. For those of you that have had something taken away from you, how would you like to have the government stepping up and taking away your business? Not only that, 59 jobs, 59 employees, 59 people who were coming every day, working every day, and part of the community. It was a big issue for me. Because the overreach of government is always going to be a big issue for me. First thing I did is I contacted my congressman. He came, visited, met everybody, said all the right things. Lo and behold, goes back to Washington, and in July of 2019, he votes against the reinstatement of my dealership and 1,200 other dealerships across the country. That's what propelled me into Congress. I called him and said, not only did you lie to me, but I'm going to remove you even if I have to run. And I did. I spent the next 14 months running, defeated that individual, and became the U.S. Congressman here in Northeast Ohio. I still had my businesses. I had to get rid of many of them, but I can tell you that business has always been something that's very important to me. I was in Washington for a few years, realized Washington is broken. Many of you on this know that Washington is seriously broken, and the only way it can be fixed is to get strong states, strong governors, and strong people who understand how to make a difference. I came back, I made an announcement in 2017 that I was going to run for governor. Many of you might remember that, but a few months later, I got a call from the President of the United States, President Trump, asking me to enter the Senate race. I had no interest, but I did. Long story short, we ran an election around the state in a very short period of time, and here's what I'm happy to tell you. I forced a Democrat incumbent to spend $33.5 million to keep his seat, to my $4 million. He outspent me 8-1, and I only lost by 150,000 net votes. But I still maintain that Ohio needs to change. We've got to make a difference, and the best place to make that difference is here in the state. So in 2019, I started traveling the state again, talking about problems and issues, talking about job losses, all the things that are still problems that have been problems. And then I realized that in 2017, Governor DeWine was never going to be the right governor, and that's why I ran against him. And of course, after 2.5 years, we've realized with mask mandates, all the other things he's done, he is not the governor we need, and I jumped back into the governor's race. So I'm looking forward to, I'm continuing to get out there and talk. I hope tonight we can answer some of your questions, talk about some of the issues. There's plenty of them, from mask mandates to immigration policy that is allowing people to come to our state, and the corruption. We can't forget about the corruption. Ohio is the #1 most corrupt state in the country. Let's not forget, First Energy has admitted to corruption, and Governor DeWine, I was just on the phone with somebody today. Governor DeWine took over $5 million in contributions from First Energy, but here's what's worse. He appointed a PUC director who now is under investigation by the FBI and has had to step down in disgrace. There are some ties to First Energy and Governor DeWine, and I think in the end, that's going to continue to come out as well. So let's open it up for some questions and see what you have.
I think one thing also the viewers should know, Jim, is to back up what you said a little bit. I was campaign manager when the president was calling you in 2018 and asking you to step in. And you were in a good position to win the governor's race. But there was a lot of smart people in the White House. They wanted to win that seat and take it away from a sitting senator, which is very difficult to do. Look at Joe Manchin in West Virginia. I mean, it's a very red state, and he wins handily each time. Trump went in there 12 times to rallies and still couldn't pull somebody across, because it's hard to beat somebody with a job already. But one of the things is I said to you then was, or the president said, and the people came in and said, the best candidate to win a statewide race in the state is Jim Renacci. He has the name ID, he has the conservative voting record, he has the pieces to win a state, Ohio. Ohio is becoming more red, just like Florida, and continues to become more of a Republican state. And they knew that, and that's why the president called you to do that and to step up. And a lot of people don't understand how difficult it is in the laws. It's not like you just walk one day. The press makes it seem this way because the press is so dishonest, but you don't walk one day from a state race to a federal race. You have to start over with everything. You have to do new bank accounts, new treasury, raise new money, and you have to start from scratch. And that was a difficult thing to do, and you ran a heck of a race. But this is your dream, and I know it is, and I'm excited to help you in Ohio. And I told you then I would come in 22. And I am now here in Ohio every day to help you do that. And I think the whole time I was campaign manager, and the president knew this too, DeWine did nothing to help the president. He'd make up excuses not to do things. He sat on TV on CNN and laughed with Cuomo, said how Governor Cuomo is the best governor during, during the pandemic and during COVID, and DeSantis was doing it wrong. In hindsight, we now see what that is. He's a Democrat. There's nothing Republican about DeWine. He is a career politician who uses the R name to get elected in our state, but acts completely different. And then when it comes down to election time with a few months to go, what's he do? He starts acting like he cares about the immigration and the border. So let's have a little discussion here about the immigration. We have thousands of refugees coming into this state when we have problems already. You already have the 50th in job creation, and now we're gonna bring in thousands of refugees. And I think you just told me before we even started this, DeWine was bringing refugees in before this even started to occur. He was already acting like a Democrat. The president did more to stop the flow of illegal immigration into the country at the wall, and now look what's occurring. We have just open floodgates, and this is going to impact Ohio too. And DeWine now wants to go to the border and act like he did something when he left Ohioans behind for 3.5 years, completely vulnerable to the immigration problem, and I think it's sad. I would love to see your input just a little bit, and before we get started on some Q&A, what you feel about what you would do differently, for immigration and what's happening in the state of Ohio.
Well, look, it's kind of interesting. I think DeWine goes even back 3 years. I mean, he was Attorney General and he wasn't doing anything as well. So we really do need to take a look at what the needs are of Ohioans first. In 2019, DeWine came in and said, I want to allow immigrants to come to Ohio. He made it public. I actually put out a press release back then and said that we shouldn't be doing this. We need to fix Ohioans. We need to fix the problems we have in Ohio before we start opening up to others. Now, again, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Christian. I do believe that we need to care for people when we can, but we need to care for our own first, make sure that Ohio is strong. Ohio is lacking in so many things. We're 50th in job creation, 50th in business, #1 in corruption, #1 in drug overdose and addiction and deaths due to it. So why don't we fix our own problems first before we allow the open borders in Ohio? And we're starting to see it. We're hearing about planes landing in Cleveland and many other big cities with illegal immigrants coming in. Look, as governor, I would make sure that doesn't happen. I would make sure that we fix Ohio first, and then let's move on. I keep saying we need to make sure we make Ohio first. And we're far from first right now. We're 50th, 46th, 49th, 44, all the different categories we are. Let's get Ohio first before we start helping others as well.
I think that's great. Let's ask a question from immigration. We got a question from Cindy. Why didn't DeWine do anything about illegals and the cartels in Ohio for Attorney General for 8 years and now governor for over 2 years? Why is it he hasn't done anything?
Well, it's better than that. Remember, DeWine has been in Ohio politics for 45 years. He's been around since Jimmy Carter. And if you think about it, when he was a senator, why didn't he do anything? When he was a member of Congress, why didn't he do anything? When he was, every position, he was lieutenant governor, when he was all of these positions. And yet now, because immigration's a problem, he flies down the border. By the way, he doesn't talk about anything when he gets there, just stands around looking, gets a few pictures. This is political theater at best. And then he comes home and then he wants to talk about it. Well, wait a minute. You could have been talking about it for 4 years, 8 years, 12 years. The last 40 years, you haven't. I think it's time just to realize that DeWine acts like a Democrat, but puts an R beside his name. We need to make sure that we remember that next May.
Yeah, and I think, Jim, one of the things is it's not only just about the people coming in also. It's drugs, it's crime. I think we're number 1 or number 2 here in Ohio for opioid overdoses, other types of drug problems. You continue to see this drugs pouring across the southern border, getting their way up here. I think it causes a lot of problems. We saw that really grow over the pandemic. What would you do as governor, to try to really fight that?
Well, it's a great point, Brad. I was with an immigration attorney down in Columbus the other day, and he was talking about how the sprawl now, the immigrants are coming into Columbus, but the sprawl is starting to get out in the suburbs. And it's starting to grow, and we're seeing that. It's really interesting, even up here in Cuyahoga County. Cuyahoga County, by the way, is the second most dangerous city in the country per capita for deaths. So you've got Cuyahoga County, and now we're starting to see Medina County, the county I live in, and Lorain County, and the counties around and all of this, much of this is being caused by what I call the illegal immigrant sprawl. They come to the cities and they start sprawling out, and it becomes a suburban problem as well. So, look, we just got to stop it. It's like a bad problem that first you shut off the people coming in, and then you fix the problems that you have. We got too many problems to fix right now, so it's another issue we have to work on.
I think Kathy asked a great question. DeWine supported sanctuary cities, which has led to this. Not only human trafficking, drug problems, other types of, as we've been talking about. What would you do as governor about sanctuary cities?
That's a great point, Kathy. We have 5 sanctuary cities in the state right now, and we need to change those. And I've said, as governor, we should cut off all state funding to those sanctuary cities. Anything we can do as a state, I would want to work with the House and work with the Senate and make sure that if you're a sanctuary, let's face it, if you're a sanctuary city, you're illegal. You're doing things illegal. There's no such thing as being a city that protects illegals. So I'm going to do whatever I can as governor to make sure, whether it's through executive order and then getting the House and the Senate, but we got to make sure that if you are going to make yourself a sanctuary city, you are not going to get the support and help of this state.
So we got a good question. I think it's Homer said, both President Trump's for the wall, which we know, build the wall. And Jim, I remember you out there yelling it with me at every rally during the Trump years. As many people might not or not know, way back in 2016 when I was employee number 1, guess who congressman number 1 was to come out and support the president? It's this guy right here. And that was before it was cool. Back when people weren't supporting him. And a lot of people in Ohio were supporting this guy named Kasich, which I completely think was, I won't say the language here. So Jim was the first guy in Ohio to cross that line. And President Trump remembers that. A lot of people like to act like they're Trump supporters and they show up to a rally 4 years later. This guy showed up and put it out back when it cost you something that Trump wouldn't have won. And that's the kind of leadership that it takes to have in Ohio, somebody that's kind of willing to take those chances. DeWine just, comes in. But he said, and these guys supported, why didn't DeWine ever get behind the wall, you think, Jim?
Well, again, I can't answer the question as to why DeWine didn't get behind it. I think he should have gotten behind it. I think he should have said, we need to make sure this wall is supported, and we should send as much help down there, because let's face it, people are coming through the wall and coming to Ohio. So, DeWine, because he knows he's in a primary, because he knows he has competition, he sends 100 National Guard down, or he sends some limited number down, just to be able to say, I did that. Well, great. But that doesn't show. I mean, come out and talk about it. Say why we need this done. Talk about the wall. It's easy when you're in the political world to send a few people down and make a big deal out of it. You know, actions like that are not really the actions we need as a governor. We needed him to step up. Let's start talking about it. You never hear Governor DeWine talking about how we really need that border wall and how President Biden made a mistake by stopping the border wall. I can tell you, President Biden has made a serious mistake by stopping that border wall, and you'll never hear that out of Governor DeWine.
I think even Democrats agree with you. They made a mistake voting for Biden now. That's getting more and more evident. Let's make a little bit of a transition here. Let's start talking about mandates. Just yesterday I tweeted out that, Democrats say it's, they're all about their being their body when they want to, abortion stuff, but, it's not your body when you want to stick things in it. And so let's talk about what you feel about vaccine mandates, mask mandates. I think a lot of people are upset, freedom means freedom, and the Republican Party has been like that for 125 years. It's been a party of freedom, and I think we have to stick by that. And I think people can manage their own health. How do you feel about that, Jim? And, what do you think, we saw Governor DeWine give away millions of dollars of money that wasn't his to try to get people to do things, forcing mandates onto employees. Where do you stand on all that, and what do you think Ohio should be in that situation?
Well, look, I've said all along, I do believe that individuals should have the right. They should have the right to get a vaccine if they want it and to not have to get a vaccine if they don't want it. They should have the right to wear a mask if they want it, but they should also have the right not to have to wear a mask if they don't want it. It's about the rights. Sometimes people criticize me when I say that. They'll say, well, wait a minute, people shouldn't get vaccines. Well, wait a minute, that's their right. Let's stick with the individual rights. And I think as long as we remember the number one most important thing should be your right. It's your individual right to make that decision. It's your individual right if you want a vaccine or not. It's not the government's right to tell you you're going to get it. It's not Biden's right to tell you that because you work for a company with 150 more people or 100, you need to get that vaccine. No, that should not be the case. We should be making sure that individual rights are protected, whether it's masks, whether it's vaccines, whether it's anything. Individual property rights, individual rights, that's so important. And look, this is America. My goodness, we shouldn't even be thinking that individual rights are important. That's why we're here. America, the land of the free, it's important that you have those rights.
Yeah. I just got a call. One guy said, let's go, Brandon. I agree. That's a funny one. So today, Shirley Anderson Daly, Ohio State Speaker, stopped, I think it's HB 435, that would have prevented vaccine mandates. Where do you stand on that topic? Where do you feel about them delaying this?
Well, look, I've said this all along. We need to make sure we protect individual rights. So we need to continue. Look, the House needs to continue to work on a bill that protects individual rights. They should not stop. If the bill isn't going to pass, find a bill that does pass, get something passed, get it done. We need to make sure we continue to work on it. It's a big topic as I travel the state. Individual mandates, not having the requirement to get vaccinated. This is something the state legislature should not leave until they come up with a solution which is acceptable to the majority of Ohioans. So I hope they keep working on it, and I hope they come back with a bill that is acceptable and can get passed to protect individuals' rights.
So I think this goes along with that a little bit. If you were governor and you win, which I think we will, what would be the first things you do, for vaccine mandates and mask mandates? What would the first week look like?
Well, first week would be simple. I would eliminate all mandates, and I would, as I say when I travel the state, we need to have a DeSantis type governor. I would, just look at what DeSantis is doing and say, make that list up, and I'm going to start with his same list. I don't mind copying good management. I don't mind copying good leadership. Sometimes it's necessary. That's one of the problems with Ohio. We're falling behind. I commissioned a report by the University of Akron that says we're falling behind. We can't keep up, but yet there's 49 other states better than us in many categories, and there's some of the states that are in the top 10. Why don't we look and see what they're doing? When it comes to mandates and vaccinations and all those things, I would start putting the same orders in, especially when it comes to children. Look, There is no school that should mandate masks. How would you like to wear a mask for 8 hours? That is criminal. It really is when you think about it. We should not be forcing our children to wear a mask for 8 hours. That's up to the parents. The parents should make that decision.
Just a reminder to everyone watching, you are watching a Facebook Live, Governor candidate Jim Renacci for the state of Ohio. You can ask your questions. If you've got anything, immigration, you want to ask about mandates, you want to ask about CRT, you want to ask about corruption, which we're going to be pivoting to here in a little bit. One thing I learned when I spent more and more time in Ohio, it is one corrupt state. The government and pay for play, lots of money moving around, and I think it needs to be cleaned up. So make sure you ask the questions and get those in there. This is your time to hear directly from a candidate who is conservative, who is ready to solve the problems of Ohio, and who has a business experience to solve those problems. An outsider-style candidate who can go like President Trump, willing to push those boundaries and solve problems. And those are the kind of candidates I support. And the reason why I got into politics is because I'm sick of career politicians that say one thing and do another, and I imagine many of you are too. I stepped away from my businesses to just continue to fight because I want my kids to have a chance. Let's talk about some of that corruption, Jim. There's been scandal after scandal. We can talk about even the GOP in this state. We can talk about the First Energy scandal. We can talk about the corruption of DeWine getting millions and millions of dollars paid through different entities. What would you do as governor? How do you feel about that? What would be your steps to try to clean up the number one corrupt state of the 50 states of the Union?
Well, some of this is pretty easy, but when you're in politics like DeWine is, he doesn't want to eliminate it. Ohio is a pay-for-play state. If you go back to 2017, you'll see one of the first things I said when I jumped in the governor's race is one of my 5 biggest issues is Ohio is a corrupt state and it's a pay-for-play state, and that would be one of my major issues. Well, think about that. That's 4 years later, we move from number 7 to number 1. And how do we move from number 7 to number 1? First Energy. That was one of the largest bribery scandals in public history in Ohio, but also across the country. But it's just not First Energy. I mean, I was down in Cincinnati yesterday, and the interview I was going through said, well, just remember, we have a scandal in Cincinnati. You're right. Cincinnati City Council has a major scandal, pay for play. And then I was in Toledo, and somebody said, hey, remember Toledo? Yes, it's the problem. We have a state, and let's not forget Cuyahoga County, about 15 years ago, a major scandal where a lot of people are in prison right now because of it, all because of pay for play. And the problem here is that elected officials know they can raise money off of promises, and that's the issue. And there's no ramification against them for doing that. So Mike DeWine raises $5 million and supports House Bill 6. And then he signs House Bill 6. Isn't it interesting that all the other bills that have come across his desk, they've taken time, whether it's a day to sign, whether it's 2 days to sign, whatever it is. But House Bill 6 hits his desk, he signs it immediately. You know why? Well, he had almost $5 million from First Energy.
It's those extra 2 commas, Jim.
Yeah, that's right. It's the extra comma.
Yeah, it's extra commas.
But keep in mind, he appointed, Brad, this is what's just so amazing. I don't even know how he gets away with this. He appointed the PUC director, Randuzzo, who got a contract to leave First Energy for $2.5 million and then came on board with the governor. And now he's under investigation. The governor's chief of staff was a lobbyist for First Energy. The governor's main lobbyist to the House and Senate was a lobbyist to First Energy, and he was the president of one of the dark money groups. Let's not forget about the dark money groups, Brad, and you weren't here when even there was money put in from First Energy to one of the dark.
We heard about it in D.C., trust me.
Yeah, and it went to his daughter.
Yep.
It went to DeWine's daughter. I mean, it is so corrupt. By the way, keep your eyes open. There's already a couple dark money groups set up attacking me, promoting DeWine and attacking me.
Let's actually be clear. I don't think there was building a smart energy grid was not the problem. It was the amount of money, right, and the things they were doing. Some of the policies were okay. It wasn't everything was bad, but millions of dollars going into helping elected officials pay for play, even if it's for just reasons. I think we need to be careful with this. getting paid to do your job is corruption. And I think that's what people don't understand. We're not against good energy policy and nuclear power plants and things like that.
And by the way,
I don't have a windmill in my backyard. I don't know if you do, but I don't.
I just announced that today. I was talking to somebody about energy. Our state is a oil and gas state, and we should promote that. But that also means we got to have all of the above. We do have to have some wind. We do have to have some solar, and we do have to protect our nuclear power plants as well.
Yeah.
The problem that occurred here was there was money for something being done. It was good legislation. There was some pieces of that legislation that were very good. And First Energy has done some really good things in Northeast Ohio. But the corruption side of it is the problem.
So let's go a little different. I want to talk a little bit before we jump into another thing. There's been obviously a lot of talk. As I tell you, Jim, this is one gossipy state. It's a funny Ohio feature. They like to talk. They like to talk to politics a lot. Let's talk about the America First agenda and how you align with that. Obviously, I played a big part in the Trump campaign. I was employee number one, still with the president today, still work with the president to help fight for the America First agenda. As most people know, or not, if you Wikipedia me, I guess, I set up America First policies, America First, and help push America First. Why don't we talk about how you are different than DeWine and the similarities you have with Trump and his agenda? The America First put Ohio first, and the differences that you have from DeWine, and just that standpoint. We talk a lot about specifics and immigration and these things, but I think people need to know how aligned you are with the president, because I haven't yet to sit with you in one meeting yet or one call. We spent a lot of time together, obviously. I still haven't found one thing where the space is in between you and Trump when it comes to policy. You do tweet less, but hey, that's not that. A lot of people might agree with that one. I can say that, but where do you sit on his agenda?
Of course, he doesn't tweet anymore right now. But I would tell you that look, his policy is why you heard early on in March of 2016, I met with President at that time candidate Trump in Cleveland, Ohio, and I told him that I endorse him. The only elected official in Ohio at that time to endorse him, to support him because of his policies. I knew we needed policy changes, not only in Washington, D.C., but here in Ohio. And his policies are spot on, less taxes. And I helped him draft, and I was one of the architects of the jobs bill and tax cut legislation. So we have that bill, but it's also the amount of regulatory regulations he cuts. Look, we got to move this state in a very similar direction. Less government, lower taxes. I want to move our state. Our state is one of the 46th or 47th worst states for taxation. We got to change that. Our state is in the top 5 for regulatory. We need regulatory relief. These are the things the president was talking about. This was his America First agenda. This needs to be our Ohio First agenda. And by the way, it wasn't easy, as you said earlier, endorsing candidate Trump at that time when everybody, look around, whether it was Mike DeWine, John Husted, all of the statewide candidates, they were all supporting, at that time, the governor. And
I think, Jim, that goes into beating DeWine. So let's talk about beating a sitting governor. I think it's important to have a pathway to victory also. It's one of the things that I've been beating the drum across the state. You need a few characteristics. You share some of these characteristics with the president. It doesn't just take an America First agenda and to get on the back of a truck and start yelling to win the governor's race. You have to be able to build a structure, raise money, have money, and guess what? When you run against the establishment, like President Trump did in 2016, you know how much money Trump raised in the primary of 2016? $0.00. The establishment was not going to help him a second. If you guys remember correctly, the Republican National Committee pretty much did everything they can to stop him until he won, and then they became his friends. And they found out how much money he could raise. But what you have to understand that is, it takes a lot of things. As a campaign manager, obviously, and helping you now, you have the right characteristics to beat DeWine. You have the name ID. People don't understand. If you don't have name ID, you are the highest and most popular name ID Republican in the state of Ohio currently, running for statewide race. So those are characteristics you have to win. Remember, you got to get over 50% on a one race with DeWine. You can't just get 15% and think that you're going to change the world. And I think that is what people need to understand. So why don't you just talk a little bit about your pathway, what you've done, and what you're trying to do, and the importance of you kind of beating DeWine. Because I think people need to understand it's going to take a real candidate to take out a sitting governor. It's not an easy thing to do.
Well, Brad, you're exactly right. And look, 97% of incumbents win. People have to understand that. So I have to have a path, and anybody that's running has to have a path. You have to have name ID. And I've worked extremely hard to make sure my name ID that I've been able to gain over the last election still continues to be out there. But it's work, it's traveling the state, it's getting people to know me. So I've been doing this, if you think, since 2017. Not just since March of this year, but since 2017 I've been doing it. And my name ID still isn't 100%. DeWine's is almost 100%.
Yeah.
So that's an issue. People think, well, I can jump into a state race. Oh, and just because I'm in, I'm going to win. Well, that's not the case.
It doesn't make them bad people. They have the right motives.
Right,
it's
absolutely.
great for people to get in, but taking out a sitting governor is difficult. I think there's
well, wait a minute. Winning any statewide race is difficult.
It's difficult.
Because people forget. I mean, I go back to, we've had a couple candidates who've run statewide who then turn around to be like Senator Voinovich. Senator Voinovich ran the first time statewide. He lost by 14%, and he was the mayor of Cleveland, so he already had a base. This is the problem. We have a big state. So I applaud people getting in the race. I applaud them. It's just they have to understand, how do they get there? How do you win? You have to have a base of people first that support you. You can't just walk in and say, I'm coming and I'm going to win.
Yep.
Then you have to have the money. There is no doubt about it. The campaign machinery to do a statewide race is probably $2 million minimum, and probably up to $10 million. So anybody that runs and says, well, I'm going to travel and I'm going to do this, God bless them. I give them all the credit in the world.
I agree.
But it's just impossible. And then you have to have a message and a plan. The difference is I have the team, I have the financial capability, and we have a message and a plan. So we have the three ingredients that shows we can win.
Well, let's talk about one other major issue, as we see right here in the shirt, Trump 2024, and the importance of Ohio to get the president back in office. Let's talk about voter integrity and what that means going to 24. So I asked the people on here also, do we trust Governor DeWine to make sure Trump gets there? I don't. And if I'm sitting back with Trump in 24, I'd be sitting there, I'd worried about Governor DeWine making sure that we don't have ballot harvesting and other items that continue to take the state, the opposite direction. So what would you do to make sure that Trump has a fair and non-cheated election in Ohio in 2024, which is one of the other major reasons I'm sitting here, because it's going to take 3 or 4 key states to get Trump back in the office, because they're going to cheat in some places. We got to make sure we shore up the solid states.
Well, you're right. And look, I've said this all along. We need a voter ID here in Ohio. I am very supportive of that. That is definitely needed, because people look, you need an ID to get on a plane. You need an ID to do so many things in this country. You should have an ID to get
we had to give an ID to get Facebook launched.
Right. And the other thing is we need we don't have, because the Democrats will say, well, people can't afford to buy an ID. Okay, I think we already have states that do this stuff. I mean, look at some of the other states. Indiana pays, if you want to vote, you register, you get an Indiana voter ID from the state of Ohio. It doesn't cost you anything. We can do the exact same thing. We need that. We also need to make sure we have regular audits and oversight of every one of our elections, because let's face it, we should always be improving on our election process. The other thing is we should never nationalize the election. We got to make sure Ohio does it right. Pennsylvania got to make sure they do it right. Arizona, Arkansas, all these other states, we do not want the federal government overseeing our elections. H.R. 1, which is being proposed right now on the federal side, should never pass, because that'll mean that the federal government takes over our election systems. We don't want that.
Okay. I completely agree. This voter ID thing is the most ridiculous thing. As I got about 10 comments there saying, who doesn't have an ID. And like a voter ID makes complete sense. I mean, you can't do anything in this country without an ID anymore. So, it's ridiculous. It's completely a way for them to do ballot harvesting, as most people know. It's not the mail-in balloting is the worst thing, as long as no one else touches your ballot and it's one person and it's identified. But when the problem is when a guy shows up with a truckload of 100,000 ballots on the back without any identification, that's where we get into trouble. And that's what you saw in states like Pennsylvania and Arizona and other places in Michigan. And I think that's where we saw a lot of corruption. So changing course a little bit, let's talk about something that's been really controversial lately. This is so controversial, I'm glad my kids are out of school at this point. CRT, critical race theory, teaching our kids that we're naturally racist and all the other things that comes along with this in our changing society. What would you do about CRT in your schools? Talk us about what you know about DeWine's board for schools. I don't know what it's officially called. You have to help me there. School board. State school board. Talk about what you know, what DeWine's done, and that he seems to me, from being in Ohio, for a few months now, he seems to be leading the CRT charge in Ohio.
Well, it's interesting. We have 20 school board members, and 8 of them are appointed by the governor. By the way, there's legislation which I approve of that would take the appointments away from the governor and put it back to an elected official. I like that idea. I would support that legislation. We need to make sure that the 20 school board members are elected. And let's face it, the 8 school board members that DeWine appointed, they all voted and supported CRT. Now, here's what you'll hear.
And we got to say, Jim, the media gives them a clean pass on this also.
Absolutely, gives them a pass. But
that's because he's a Democrat.
You're so right when you say that. But think about that. He had 8 members who supported CRT. And then I hear people say, well, Renacci, CRT isn't in the schools. Wait a minute. Right now it's in the libraries, in the schools. There's library books. It's a starting process. There might not be a curriculum right now in every school, but the process is starting. And remember, once you open up the door, it's easy just to kick it wide open. So we need to stop that. And as governor, I would step up right away and say, we are not going to fund schools to promote CRT. We are not going to, by the way, I think we got to eliminate Common Core as well.
There you go. I was going to go right there. Yeah. Common Core.
We got to get rid of Common Core, but
put parents back in control.
Absolutely. We got to put, and that's why I say with mass mandates as well. But think about this. We take, for every $4 we take in the state, one of it comes from the federal government. We need to tell the federal government no more. We don't want your money. And people say, well, how do you balance your budget? We spend too much. So let's cut our spending down to where it should be compared to other states. Let's tell the state they can have their money, and then let's make Ohio a sanctuary state of freedom from the federal government.
Yeah. And people continue to say things. I mean, like, Jim, so far I've sat with you, I've now known you a few years. Again, I can't find any even daylight between you and Trump's policies. It's the irony. It's the state of corruption in Ohio. When you start getting close to winning, the establishment attacks you. They start to do things. DeWine, as I was campaign manager, DeWine would be scared to death if Renacci would show up with Trump events. DeWine did everything he can to keep you out of things because he knows that people hear you. They hear what you talk about. It is the policies that Ohio needs. And I think that we got to understand. Why don't we bring up one thing?
Well, before we go there, I want to add something because I'm seeing some questions.
Go ahead. I want to talk about what the establishment is trying to do to stop you in this race. Because I think people need to understand that they're not doing that to the other candidates. They're doing it to one who can win, and we got to talk about that later.
Well, there's some questions coming around about school boards and
you can see how we start talking about CRT and Common Core, we see parents get mad.
Yeah, so people being arrested and what the Attorney General has done. Look, we need a governor who steps up and says, if you're going to school board meetings, you have that right as a private citizen, and you should not be considered anything but a parent who's concerned about their child. So I can tell you that. Why don't we hear that from DeWine? Why doesn't Governor DeWine come out and say that? It's simple. It just should come up. You know why? He doesn't want to shame the Democrat Attorney General or the Democrat President. So again, some of this stuff can be fixed really easy. Just have a strong governor.
Well, I think even going in addition to that, what about school choice? How are you feeling about school choice and the president's, push to having more choice? It's pretty amazing. Democrats, you have the choice to abort a baby for them, but if you have the baby, you can't choose where it goes to school. I still think that's an amazing feat of theirs. That's because the school, the teacher unions are, have them in their back pocket. So why don't you talk about what you think about school choice and what difference that could make to Ohio education?
Well, look, I'm a big believer that parents should have the choice where their children go, and we should come up with a fundamental amount that can give every child in our state a good education. Let's say it's $10,000 a year. I'm just using that number. And then that $10,000, you can take that $10,000 and go wherever you want. Private school, you can go to the public school, you can do whatever you want. And by the way, if parents want to do more for their school district, here's what you do. If you get the $10,000 per student in your school district, and then if the school district wants to do more, they can go back to the local parents and say, we want to do additional things, we want to do more, and they can get their own levy at the support of those parents in that area. That's what makes a school, it's competition, it works, it'll make our school system stronger.
Yeah, I mean, nothing helps like competition. Those teachers know they actually have to perform. It would be amazing how they do it, but right now, they don't even really have to go to school. DeWine, you give them free pass. The teachers union own DeWine and the Democrats. It shows another way that he's Democrat. So we got another question. Let's move a little bit to economy. I think, as we get out of COVID here, we're going to start moving towards the economic growth. What's going to occur? I think, DeWine will be a disaster in helping Ohio. We've seen a migration away from Ohio. We've seen this is a beautiful state, lots of opportunity, affordable housing, unbelievable cost of living. It's more affordable to live here than states like Kansas and Nebraska and things like that. I mean, with a lot of opportunity. So Aaron asks, Jim, if elected governor, how would you attract or retain larger businesses? I think this is important. It goes back to what Texas did. There's a lot of people looking to move away from New York, these high tax states. Talk to us about how you would use the America First, the Trump agenda, and the different things that we saw there to attract business and to bring business back to the United States. How would you do that for Ohio?
Well, look, some of this, I'm still in business. I've been in business for almost 38 years. Here's what you do. You look at the states that are doing the best and you take some of their ideas. So what are the other states doing? Look, Texas, Florida, South Dakota, name the states that are booming. They have zero tax rate. We got to get our state competitive. They have a consumption tax. We need to move toward a consumption tax. These are all the things we need to do. Now, there'll be some people that'll say, I don't like a consumption tax. There's problems with it. Look, let's study what Texas is doing. Let's study what Florida's doing,
Tennessee.
South Dakota, Tennessee, all these other states. And let's move our tax system to that so we can bring businesses in. We don't want big businesses, though. I'm telling you right now, the study that we got from the University of Akron says the biggest failure in Ohio is they continue to go after the big 1,000-employee businesses. But the best cities and the best states have what they call economic diversity, smaller businesses that do a lot of different things. And once you bring economic diversity into the state, then you have a state that's growing and prospering. Again, I don't want to rewrite the book. I just want to go look at what Tennessee's doing, Texas is doing, Florida's doing, South Dakota's doing.
Well, I think one interesting thing that Jim, we were driving somewhere, you were talking about this was, talk about the Ohio budget compared to states with almost nearly identical population.
Well, yeah, it's amazing. It's one of the things we have to change. Ohio just passed an $80 billion budget. Think about that, $80 billion with about 11 million people, approximately. Florida just passed an $88 billion budget with 22 million people. Twice the size, only $8 million more. But let's do another comparison. North Carolina and Georgia, about the same size as Ohio, yet their budgets are $40 billion, half of Ohio's. We spend too much, we tax too much, and you know what? Your elected officials will say, I saw a crazy flyer going around, Governor DeWine cut taxes. Really? Really? What? That's just amazing. First off, Governor DeWine didn't cut taxes, but here's the truth of it is, we have rearranged our tax system so there's we tax everything here. We're one of the 4 states that taxes everything, from state income tax to state sales tax to county sales tax to all these other taxes that just add up. We are one of the highest taxing states in the country.
But Jim, I think this is a good place for you to talk about your business background, what you did. I've heard your stories about mayor, congressional. This is a time where a fiscally responsible, not politician, a business person. This is one of the best things about Trump. Came in and used common sense things, started looking at bureaucracy and saying, no wonder the United States is growing. No wonder this trade deal is horrible. It was run by a whole bunch of bureaucrats that never employed a single person or ever run a company in their life. I mean, look at Biden. How long has he been in his whole life in office? why would he even know what a business runs like? So I think this is a good place for you to just talk about your business background and the success you've had. Because if Ohio wants to come back, it needs a successful business person, just like President Trump. And one of the reasons why I got behind him in 2016.
Absolutely, Brad. And I'll tell you, I am the only candidate for governor in the race that is self-made. That's important to say. I'm the only one that started with nothing.
Doesn't DeWine have like a giant trust fund?
Yeah, well, DeWine's family was a business. And
It must be nice.
yeah, absolutely. I started with zero. I came to Ohio with a couple $100 in bank and started my own business. I took all the risks. I understood that I could lose everything. In fact, when you're in business, sometimes you get to a point where you don't sleep at night because you got to make payroll. You got to, you got to pay the mortgages. So I went from $200 and I lived the American dream. I saw one of the questions, how did you make all your money? I lived the American dream. I'm proud of that. I'll tell you, somebody, I never forget, I was on Fox one day and they said to me, oh, Congressman, they see the house you live in. I go, oh, they should see the house I grew up in. By the way, anybody on here, you can go to Monongahela, Pennsylvania. You can buy my house that I grew up in for about $1,200. If you're happy.
They might be famous someday.
It's 2 bedrooms. And it's worth about $1,200. That was where I grew up. But I understood the value of a hard day's work, and I built a business. So I understand. I'm also the only one that can say, from an early age of 20, my adult age, to today, that I signed the front of the paycheck, not the back of the paycheck, in all the candidates that are running for governor. From the age of 21 or 22 to today, I'm the only one that can say that I risked capital from an early age. I started with nothing.
And I think, Jim, that's important for when you're going to have to go and fix this fiscal system, the economic system of the state, the amount of taxation, the amount of just gunk of the government bureaucracy and costs and money and going out the door and being wasted. This state needs a kick. Let's move on now to. I think Steffi's asked a good question here. I'm going to add a little to her question. Obviously, we're going through some high inflationary times with the Biden administration. We're seeing skyrocketing costs. Lots of seniors are going to be in their homes across Ohio. We have an aging population here in Ohio. How are we going to make sure those seniors can stay in their homes? What's a plan that you have, or what are you going to do about that if you come in? I think it's going to be important because these rising prices could cause taxes to increase. And we can't have seniors getting out of their houses if they can still function and live a good life.
Well, think about it, Brad. You have people who have lived their whole life in a home. They're now on fixed income, Social Security, barely making ends meet. Their taxes are going up. So our tax system has changed in Ohio. Yeah, we might have cut business taxes, but our property taxes are up over 400%. These people can't stay in the home anymore. So I've said one of my goals will be to have, if you have lived in a home for X amount of years, now remember, governors don't make law, but governors can promote law and get the House and Senate to pass it. I would promote a plan that says, if you've been in your house for 20 years or 30 years, and we'll have to come up with that time, and you're over 65, you don't have to pay real estate taxes anymore. You have paid your share. And I think that's important. We should come up with a plan so that seniors don't lose their homes because they can't afford to stay in their homes any longer.
I think this is a good question. I think this is, people, obviously that don't know you as well as I do. People see DeSantis out there, the president, fighting hard. I'm a big supporter of DeSantis. I helped, in the back kind of in 2018, push for his help win the Florida election. I obviously played a big part in 2 of Trump's elections. Talk about the backbone it takes. You're a tough guy. I think, people don't get this. You have the kind of same spirit of a fighter. I mean, look what you're doing right now. But talk about how you're going to get in there and fight. I think people right now look for outsiders who can fight. And I wouldn't be sitting here next to you. I mean, as I've said, I wouldn't do it if I didn't know you didn't have that fighting spirit, because I tend to, you know me, I tend to be a fighter in spirit also. So what are you going to do to get in there? And what are you going to do when you get in there? Both ways. What are you going to fight to get in there, and how are you going to fight when you get in there and show the backbone I think Ohio needs to be a little more like Florida?
Well, absolutely. Look, I'm fighting now to jump in this race. I mean, when I got in this race, I realized this is a fight, and we're going to fight to win because we need to take back Ohio. But let's also look at my background. I have fought every day in business. I have, I fought the Ohio tax system when they came after me for taxes for 12 years, all the way to the Supreme Court of Ohio and won. These are the kind of things. I'm a principled guy. Anybody that sees me knows I'm going to fight for what's right. I'm going to step up. So I have a track history of doing it. It's easy for people to step up and say, well, I'm going to fight for you and I'm going to do this. Well, what's their history? What have they done? You can look at my history and you can see I've fought for a tax issue. I've fought for my employees. I've fought for, very different things throughout my career. I've been a fighter, whether it's for my employees, for my family, for the people of Wadsworth, Ohio, and I'm going to continue to do that. When you have a background that shows, not only talk, it's easy to talk. Brad, I always get tired of that. People talk, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that.
Oh, trust me.
Look at their history. Look at what they've done.
There's talkers and there's doers, and you're definitely a doer.
And so it's always the same thing. But anyway, I will promise you, I will fight to change things. Best person to put in a position who's one who has been successful, who has lived the American dream and understands how valuable that is to our children and our grandchildren. I want that for our future. But the one thing I haven't talked about, Brad, is I also have a 1-year-old grandson, and that's the biggest driver for me. I'm going to be fighting for him and my children and your grandchildren.
I have to call this out. A couple of people had a misconception. Said DeWine did not grow up in a mansion and act like you did. It's completely almost. He grew up with a wealthy family with a multi-million-dollar. He has millions of dollars that have been entrusted to him from his family. And this man grows up in a $1,200 house in Pennsylvania. But this is what the media does, people. What they want to do is they start selling a story. And when you act like you're a leftist and you do their agenda, they will sell yourself in any way that makes you be sold. And to think that DeWine was this humble beginning person and this man somehow came from money tells you everything you should know about the media. Do not believe them.
Yeah.
Do you not remember? I mean, I know Trump has been out for a little bit here and not on Twitter, but hashtag fake news. The media is not your friend and they're not telling you the truth. They have an agenda. There's very few outlets that tell the truth. It's one of the most amazing things that all these people on here go, I don't believe the press unless they want to believe them. And that's the problem.
DeWine was in Congress in 2006. You can go back and look. His financial report was that he was worth $76 million in 2006.
Humble beginnings.
And it was all trust fund. It was all trust fund. Look, Governor DeWine started out as a prosecutor in Greene County after he got out of law school. He has not worked a day in his life in anywhere but politics, and he made his money because his parents were very wealthy. God bless them. They live the American dream. He's benefited.
Let's talk about how much money his campaign owes that trust.
Right. Well, his campaign owes his trust
It's
$4 million.
filings you can find owes him $4 million. I mean, he borrowed from his trust fund to run for office. And I don't see how that's humble. Did you borrow from your $1,000 house?
Yeah.
No, okay.
I'm telling you, you can look at my filings. By the way, I got to add this. I always chuckle. People say you made all your money in Congress. Let me tell you something. I lost money in those years in Congress because I couldn't. I was stuck in Washington.
I mean, the president's the same way, right?
Yeah,
it's hard.
You lose value, you lose money, you can't do anything.
So let's go to something I think I am very close to. I think a lot of voters in the America First agenda are our Bill of Rights, and especially our first couple, rights. I've been saying lately we've lost our right to the First Amendment. Not that we don't have the right to free speech anymore. We just don't have the right to be wrong anymore. Cancel culture, as I call it. If you don't say what they want you to say, they just cancel you. They'll just put fake news up about you and destroy your life. And then, two, obviously, the right to bear arms. And the Second Amendment and the importance of constitutional carry and the things Ohio people believe in. So why don't you walk our viewers and listeners here through how you feel about that? Because I think that's one of the most important things of being a Republican, our Bill of Rights.
Well, we forgot, look, I've said this all along, we've lost our way in the Republican Party in many ways. We forgot what should be important to us. First Amendment, Second Amendment, pro-life. I am 100% pro-life, but I'm also 100% pro-Second Amendment. I grew up, anybody who ever saw the movie Deer Hunter, that was filmed in my backyard. I'm serious, it was filmed in Clareton, PA. That's where I grew up. We hunted, we fished, we were sportsmen, we learned how to use a gun. I hate to say this, but even in my high school, once a month, we took our guns into high school and we used to have a hunting and fishing day. I mean, this is the background. So I've been a believer in the Second Amendment. I've lived the Second Amendment. And I chuckle when I see people say, oh, I'm a Second Amendment guy, and then I see them grab a gun and put the hand on the trigger. By the way, you want to know somebody who's not a Second Amendment guy? The guy who puts his hand on the trigger when he holds the gun. That finger better be outside the trigger.
Well, I think DeWine has a horrible score with the Second Amendment groups also.
He was F-rated.
I mean, I know Don Jr. talks to me all the time about it, and Don Jr. is always telling me that DeWine's one of the worst governors. He might actually, Don Jr. is actually very in tune with this more than he might. He's a very big sportsman, obviously a big hunter, and I think he's told me multiple times DeWine might be the worst Republican Second Amendment governor in the United States.
When DeWine was in the Senate, he was ranked as an F rated by the NRA. I was A+. It gives you, we're opposites. We're totally opposites. Now, here's what people will tell you. Well, he did a little better when he comes back from Washington, he's an F rated NRA. But then he goes and becomes an attorney general, and he does a few good things, and everybody gives him a pass. Listen, there's no pass to give him. Look, as soon as he gets governor, what's he want to do? He wants to do red flag laws. He wants to do strong Ohio legislation. He's back to being what he is. Look, a zebra doesn't change his stripes, and Mike DeWine doesn't change his stripes either.
What about cancel culture? I'd like to hear a little, what are your thoughts on cancel culture also, this just attack of the left to just, cancel anybody that doesn't agree with them?
Well, it's a problem. Look, and we need to attack back. We need to have a governor who attacks back. This is what I really don't appreciate about Governor DeWine. You never hear him talking about this stuff. He's got a pulpit, and all he talks about is vaccinations. Or he'll say, hey, I visited a school. But he doesn't come out. By the way, the last time you saw Governor DeWine in public was probably 2018. That's because he gets booed in public now.
He does.
And he is not showing up in public.
Yeah.
So why?
He's not going to show up at a Trump rally, that's for sure.
He's not going to show up at any event where there's people and Republicans. It's got to be a closed-in room. Lieutenant Governor Husted showed up at an event in Columbus the other day, but here's what he said. I'm not going to answer any questions unless they're handed to me and I see them in advance. And he brought 15 or 16 young people around him. And he came in and he left. That's the closest I've seen. But even then, he had to bring a whole group of people around him instead of walking in. You'll see me walk in some days, you won't even realize it's me because I'm walking in with from the car and walking into an event. People say, is that Renacci? Yeah, that's Renacci.
So before I let you kind of wrap this up, just a few things, some closing notes for everybody. You can visit jimrenacci.com. You can see the events as crisscrosses the state. This man spends more time in a car. I think we need to hire a chiropractor just to put in the back seat with him. He is crisscrossing the state. He is the hardest working I have ever seen. I think yesterday, how many you were? 3-4 events just yesterday, 2 today. I mean, just everywhere, crisscrossing the state. He cares and loves the state. He's trying to make every single county meet everybody that he can and be able to fight for his agenda. On top of that, you can go and order some signs. You can put things in your yard, be supportive. You can go to jimrenacci.com and sign up to be a volunteer. We're building a grassroots organization. Look, if we're going to beat DeWine and we're going to take out this establishment, one thing we didn't get to talk about is how hard the establishment is threatening people. If they even work on this campaign, they won't be able to work for 10 years for anybody that's tied to the establishment. They are trying to destroy lives if you support anything against DeWine. That is how the establishment plays dirty games. That's how the media plays games. They want to control you and control who gets to run for office. And that's sad. And that's why I think that so many will step up eventually and volunteer for you, Jim, because I think the more people see the truth. But Jim, why don't you just give your closing argument for this, and guys, this won't be the only time. We'll be back. We've got a long way till the primary in May. So go ahead, Jim.
Well, thank you, and look, thank you all for being on tonight. Here's a couple things. I did see a question come by. Well, Second Amendment doesn't mean you're a hunter. I 100% agree. By the way, I'm a concealed carry holder, and I've got 5 or 6 guns that I own. I'm a big supporter of the Second Amendment. But let's talk about the race. I keep telling people this. Incumbents have a 97% chance of winning. You know why? Because everybody wants to break up and go after another. If there's 2 people in a race or 3 people in the race, it makes it tougher and tougher to beat an incumbent. Because the incumbent has a certain base that they're not going to lose. So here's what I need. I keep asking everybody. We need to come together. We need to realize that the #1 goal should be defeating Governor DeWine. The only way, I hope Governor DeWine's watching this so he knows he's going to be defeated.
By Governor.
We need to defeat Governor DeWine, and the only way to do it is to come together, to realize that Maybe we won't agree on everything 100%, but I guarantee if you get to know me, we're probably going to agree on 85 to 90% of everything.
And you agree with Trump 100%.
And I agree with Trump 100%. If you're a Trump supporter, you should be on my side. But for us to win, we need to come together. We need to say the goal should be to defeat DeWine, not to defeat Renacci. I keep seeing people, I see some comments, you're not defeating Renacci, you got to defeat DeWine. We got to come together, work together. Together we can do this. I appreciate you being on tonight. JimRenacci.com.
Make Ohio great again. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon.